Hello, this is me doing the mid-year freakout tag for the second year in a row. Look at me being all punctual and regular. If only I could ever keep this up. So let's just get straight into it. I will go through all of the questions as well as we go through the tag. So the first question is, what is the best book that you've read this year in 2024? I would say the best book that I've read so far is Hamnet. I've spoken about Hamnet more than enough times on my channel, but it's literally just that good. Okay, it has a richness that brings a real fake person to life, and I will always love a story that is based on a famous person that wasn't truly real. I think the story uses Hamnet as a name and a concept really effectively to tell a story instead of Anne Hathaway. The story covers grief, gender, and fame as a collective force of punishment against Shakespeare. It's not particularly scathing remarks upon Shakespeare by any means, but it allows for a look at Tudor England in close proximity to something that we already know, which is Shakespeare. You know, we know Shakespeare's Tudor England and London, but perhaps less about Shakespeare's Tudor Stratford upon Avon, which is where he's from. And it's interesting to look into this world of women and the women of the underclass with only whispers of his fame, and even then the horrors that his fame brings upon them. The next is, what are your favourite new releases, or like what are you going to read? I have a couple of new releases that I'm interested in. There's a new Leigh Bardugo book, and one thing about me, I'm gonna read her books, even if I'm sort of late to the party. It's apparently about, honestly, I felt a bit more lost after I'd read the synopsis than before. It's about a girl who is maybe a familiar or a servant, and she finds a vampire and maybe she has powers. It doesn't really matter to me. If Bardugo is writing it, I'm going to tune in for it. Plus vampires. Plus vampires. Next one is Funny Story, which is Emily Henry's 2024 release. And I kind of love this kind of sticky situation where two people are stuck together for some reason because of circumstances. I'm not the biggest fan of miscommunication. Actually, I would say I'm quite a staunch hater of it. And while I don't actually know whether there isn't any miscommunication in this, I just feel like the type of miscommunication issues I make a big deal out of in rom-coms probably won't be in this. Plus, I can't even anticipate what the oncoming third act breakup will even be about with this book. So at least there's one positive point out of all of this. Hopefully I like this book more than I liked some of her others. The last sort of new release that I want to read is something that I never ever thought about that there could be or exist, and that is another Foxhole court book. I've also never really cared about Jean Moreau, which is the main character of this book, even if I've read fan fiction about these books, which I definitely did. I've never really wondered what he's up to. I always thought that the Jeremy/Jean fans were a bit delusional, but apparently they are not, and I too will join them in their delusion soon enough. Can't wait to read this. I genuinely can't believe it exists. The next question is, what is a book that has surprised you? And a fun surprise this year has been Foster, a short and very endearing novel whilst being a truly impactful story. Maybe it's only because I keep bringing this book up in videos, but I've just kept thinking about this novel, like the way that it was able to paint such an intimate portrait of family and belonging in such a tiny frame is simply striking. I've spoken about this like a lot now, especially in this video that I'll put here. So I'll let it go for now, but really, really amazing book. I hope you read that. It's very, very short and very easy to read. The next one is my new favourite author, and that is Maggie O'Farrell. I've been keeping up with her work since Hamnet. I did not read that when it first came out, but I forget at times that she's not actually a new author. Like, she has a wealth of backlog that can be discovered. It's also interesting that her writing novels that adapt characters or people is quite a recent gimmick when looking through her work. So, you know, good for her, and cheers to her newfound success. I don't really know how successful she was before Hamnet, but you know, that obviously won the Women's Fiction Prize. Alternatively though, I do not have much interest in her other work. So like, hopefully the stuff that she puts out in the future will be more my style, because I do want to keep reading her work, but I don't really have any interest in reading stuff that she's already written so far. Some books that I'm anticipating this year, well, I only have 3. Mirrored Heavens is the first one. So Mirrored Heavens is the last book, I believe, to be in the Between Earth and Sky series, and it might actually already be out. It might already be a new release, but we'll see. The last book had a bit of an old second book syndrome kind of vibe, yet it was very interesting since the end of the first book had an apocalyptic event happen. So I feel like the second book's reckoning with that event was quite well paced, but I was definitely less intrigued by it. I hope that this story has a lot more going for it. There's a lot of loose threads that need to be sort of tied up in this novel, and I think they will be. Additionally, I think if the tense atmosphere of the first book could make a return in this one, this has the potential to be like a really incredible read, because I was truly wowed by the first book, and then the second book was sort of like a slow down from that. Say whatever you want about her, I'm one of Sally Rooney's girls. I will be sat and I will be reading Intermezzo when it comes out, like all of the other basic bitches. It is said to be following two brothers, a lawyer and a chess player. I think the book pulls up to bat with a pretty impressive plot summary, like a very gorgeous cover reveal and promise of spoonfuls of communism being poured down our throats, and if anyone's ready for it, it's your local leftist sad girl reader, you know? Like, not to toot my own horn, but I don't feel like there's a lot of leftists that also read Sally Rooney. Actually, no. I think most leftists probably do. But as in, most Sally Rooney readers aren't leftists. Actually, I don't think either of those are true. But I just feel like we're in the minority. And I feel like if you're a leftist and a Sally Rooney reader, you like her books more, because when she's like just espousing shit, you're like, I also believe in this. Because she too is a sad girl leftist reader, like one of us. She's one of us at heart. The last anticipated book is the new Ava Reid novel, and this is about Lady Macbeth. I did not read Ava Reid's YA Dark Academia novel, A Study in Drowning, because I felt that in my bones I would have disliked it. And I'm sticking by my commitment to not read books that I don't think I will like. But the relationship between Reid, gender and power that was crafted in Juniper and Thorn was increasingly fascinating. So I'm interested as to how she will describe Lady Macbeth, who is, you know, a very well studied and impressive literary figure, as opposed to what she's brought up so far. As I just mentioned, I'm trying not to read things I don't like, so I've not read anything I think is particularly disappointing, which is great. Conversely, I've also not actually read that much this year, so that could also be the reason for not finding anything. But after 2023 was the year of sort of upsets, it's nice to not have anything too bad to say about a book. So the next one is what's my favourite character, and that I think is Sibling Dex from Psalm of the Wild Built. I find the idea of a monk, which is what Sibling Dex is, being a therapist for the people without many other rules aside from a love and respect for religion quite surreal. Plus, I think the way that Sibling Dex contemplated and approached life felt very reminiscent of my own sort of I feel trapped thought process. I liked that we see a progression and stasis of Sibling Dex, you know, the happy and the sad side that comes out during either the progression or the stasis. And I think that made me understand them more and also root for them more intentionally. Obviously, I love the robot Mosca app and like their companionship to Dex, and that's what I think overall made Sibling Dex a more compelling character. But the way that Sibling Dex navigates life in a casual but purposeful yet lost way made me feel emotional, even if we live in very different paces of life. And then on the opposite side, my least favourite character is the Duke, which after saying Maggie O'Farrell is one of my new favourite authors, is a bit rogue, I won't lie. But I don't like the Duke, who is the villain of The Marriage Portrait. And I think that he's a bit of a non-well fleshed out character. He feels neither evil or nice. And whilst this feels partly the point of his character, it is not an interesting characterization of a character the audience already knows to be quite Machiavellian. Like, he's a distant character, he's like a stance away from the story. The poem My Lost Touches, which is what the book is based on, is about his version of events, but we're not on his side. Like, he's narrating, but we're not on his side. We do not see him as he is to others, which is the point. You know, the book also wants to explain that we don't like him, but like, we already kind of know that. I don't know, it's a very odd tone to take. Plus, he's meant to be quite a mischievous and like distinctly a liar, like something that is not outlined in this book clearly. Like, even if the Duchess, who is an unreliable, naive narrator, cannot understand him as this, there should be an air of him being sort of a fake, conniving type of evil, which is not present at all in the book. A book that made me cry is Breasts and Eggs. There are many tense and tender moments, but the book is also like gougingly and hauntingly real at points. One specifically where the main character interacts with another character who believes that people should not bring children into this world, claiming that a world like this should not be populated. I cried like a baby at that part, tears streaming. I was like snotty, it was disgusting. I think it is written to hit that hard and be as impactful as it is, and I felt every word. I don't want children, and conversations like this resound deeply with me. My reasons are much more like personal, but I don't believe that anyone should be able to tell anyone that they shouldn't have children or have a say on other people's decisions on the matter. But that monologue that she delivers feels disgustingly dystopian about the world in a way that makes you remember, like, we actually do live like this. It's dystopian, like, this is the world and this is how we live in it and this is how we have to interact with the world. Like, we interact with the world that is as dystopian as she describes, which is horrifying, and that is why it made me cry like a baby. On the other hand, a book that made me happy is Psalm for the Wild Built. As I've already outlined, Hal Sibling Dex is my favourite character so far, and a big part of that is just because of how optimistic this book is. This book writes with purpose on the emotion of happiness. Happiness is for a break or for confidence or for just like life itself. I think books that have happy endings seem to veer towards like not taking themselves seriously or being only in pursuit of that ending. There is not only happiness here, I think, but the essence of optimism itself. I think in life, finding yourself also, which is a big part of this book, is something reserved for your early years. Have it done by 30, then you have to clock in and understand what you're about. I'm not sure how old Sibling Dex is, but after being a monk and then becoming a different kind of monk and then running away from monkdom for a bit, they still don't seem to be particularly found or clued in. Moscap, the robot, has no idea what being clued in is. The concept of learning, enjoyment, and discovery is lifelong to robots. And also to generally anyone in this wider world, there's a bit more freedom and leeway. The process of life is the action, I think, of enduring, but the novelty of being able to learn and grow in an easy way is much more fun, which is what this book tries to tell us is vital to life, even if it is kind of in vain. I'm very hopeful about the future, but I think this utopia is a despairingly long stretch away from where we are now. The most beautiful book that I read this year was undoubtedly Anne of Green Gables, the graphic novel. It was just like gorgeous from cover to cover, and I speak about this book in more detail in my 6 books in 6 days video, but once again, I'm here to say that Brenna Thumbler is a creative goddess, and this book is beautiful and gorgeous, and if you can find this book and if you can read this book, you should, and you should read all of Brenna Thumbler's other work as well. The next question is something that I made up by myself. I did this last year as well, and that first question is a book that lived up to the hype, and that for me was Serious Concerns. Also recently brought this book up, thoroughly enjoyed this. I felt like the funny, hapless, cozy atmosphere that was created was quite beautiful, if a tad repetitive in that collection. It delivered, and it was a quick read, and it has me more invigorated for poetry than anything else has had in years. A book that didn't live up to the hype was The Marriage Portrait. Once again, I'm slagging this off more than you would expect, but in turn, Hamnet was good enough for me to feel reverence for Maggie O'Farrell all by itself. I liked it that much. So, telling you how much I liked Hamnet. But this book is decent. I think the cover art is fantastic. And the tense through line of the plot does keep you on edge. Does it do any of the character-driven moments satisfactorily? Maybe not. I will reiterate, however, I have a very personal connection to this poem since I studied it. So the novel not matching or even being in conversation with the poem in a fulfilling way makes it fall a little short for me, though I can't say I wasn't into it. So it's not a true disappointment, it doesn't belong in that section. Instead, it's sort of saved by the virtue of being quite a page turner. The structure of this is very good. It flits between the future and the past, so you get to hear and understand a lot about the life of the Duchess, which does keep you interested until the point where you realise where the end of this novel kind of goes. The last of my questions is a novel that surpassed the hype. And this was another surprising, well-loved short story, and that is Galatea. I've spoken about all three of the books that I talked about in my last video. Like, I just talked about them, but also maybe I read more in that video or for that video idea that I have in a while. I've been in a reading slump. But in regards to this novella, it has a very good structure and really good proper characterization. And like, that can do wonders, you know, like who would have thought that could do well for a book? My favorite part in this though is when I've read this kind of like in 1 hour. I read this like on a bus and then immediately felt the need to watch the last episode of The Sandman season 1. You know, if you know, you know. So, you know, when will the next season of that show be out? And when will the new Madeline Miller novel be out, we wonder? The last question is a book that you really want to read before the end of the year. And that for me is Dune. I am obsessed with movies and believe in my capacity to also be obsessed with the novels. You know, the story as a whole, I think, you know, it really fits in with who I am. I've grown into a person who doesn't really need or crave reading the book first, like I really used to be that person, and have even become someone who wants to not know the story as to enjoy the movie more. But I think there's more to this story than what can be condensed into the film, even if the book was split into 2, as in like the movie was split into 2 from 1 book. I love knowing lore. Plus, I think my sci-fi meter is sort of like empty, like it's filled, it's ready to be filled. I think I'm ready to try reading longer, more complex stories that are not in the contemporary world. You know, I think I've strayed too far from what I know being high fantasy and sci-fi. They will always be my favourites, even when I don't really make enough time for them in my reading schedules. That is all for this year's tag. I can only hope for better stats by the end of the year. I've liked everything that I've read so far, so in that regard we've made some personal progress, but otherwise we do need to get those numbers up. Even just like personal, you know, I feel like I'm not reading as much, but I do think I should make myself read a bit more, like reading on the way into work, on the way back from work, on random commutes to places, before bed. I think maybe like getting a Kobo would fix this, or it could just be like a massive waste of my money, so I don't know, I just feel like I need to make more time, but also I always sleep on the train to work, so, you know, you lose some, you win some. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Like the video if you like it, and subscribe if you're really about it. Hope you have a great day, and see you next time.